Hello, and welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel. I am delighted to have you on board. Thank you for stopping by. So this is a wine educational channel, which is really designed to help those of you studying the world of wine get more from your studies, more understanding. So of course you can then tackle your complex and challenging examinations with much more confidence. At least that is the aim. Welcome to a series here called The Wines of the World. That's the D3 of the WSET Level 4. That's the diploma. And here we're looking at an introduction to Italy. So this is part 2 of 7. So part 1 was on the ancient history. We're now going to go into the Middle Ages and to the modern age of Italy. Please remember that this is an introduction to Italy. So these are major concepts which will be drilled down in more detail as we go through each of the key parts of Italy. Now, this part, along with the previous part, is available as only free content, whereas parts 3 through to 7 is only available on my e-learning portal. That's over at www.winewithjimmy.com. Any comments or questions or concerns, please pop them in this video below. Make sure you click like because it helps, and click subscribe to get all of our weekly update information. You can also utilize social media at the bottom of every slide if you are that way inclined. So let's pick up from where we left off from video 1, talking about really the dissolution of the Roman Western Empire. And then what was created out of that. And we're talking about really the Dark Ages leading into the Middle Ages. So the Dark Ages were dark in terms of viticulture and wine, as well as many other concepts. There was the disappearance of the Roman society across Western Europe, as we know, and the demand for distinctive local wine across that empire would cease to exist along with the empire itself. The real pieces were picked up by monasteries and abbeys and churches. The church itself was important because they adopted wine as a part of liturgical, sacramental purposes. So utilizing red wine, for instance, as the blood of Christ. They kept vineyards in smaller areas around Western Europe going, and they're the ones that we have to credit for the survival during these Dark to Middle Ages times. Now, we classically understood that Greeks, Romans, Phoenicians would store and transport wine in clay jars called amphora. Well, the monks are the ones which are attributed for changing that to oak barrels. So wooden barrels, lots of different types of wood, not just oak, were utilized: chestnut, cherry, acacia, but oak became a very popular choice. They were not perfectly airtight, and they weren't so understood or as well made as they are today. So, of course, many of the wines coming from those days, Dark to Middle Ages, will likely to have been heavily oxidized and potentially with a lot of skin contact. We're talking sort of orangey, dark wines typically, and lots of flavorings were used, which was adopted from the Romans again. A little bit of understanding the complexity of Italy around this time. So here you will see a number of maps, and you can see how the Italian peninsula becomes split in many different ways in terms of lots of different independent political and military entities. So this includes the likes of different kingdoms, republics, and then even city-states or maritime republics being formed. And this really leads to an extreme fragmentation of the Italian peninsula. Think about other nations in Europe around this time. England becomes exceptionally powerful, really sort of taking control of the British Isles. France becoming a bigger nation and more stronger. Spain eventually, of course, after the Reconquista, but Portugal, for example, and really becoming single military and political mights in their own countries. Italy didn't have this until much later on, until the Risorgimento, the unification of Italy, in the middle of the 19th century. So it was a very fractured area. So therefore, you find that lots of the local parts of the Italian peninsula would really stay true to their cultural origins, and that would link into wine as well. So lots of local wines would emerge, but stay domestic, stay in that local area. So you have a mosaic of cultures, languages, traditions, gastronomy, and wine as a result of this. So yeah, quite an important time, really, from the 10th to the 17th centuries. But some things did start to change. Now, from the 11th to the 14th centuries, we have the economic situation increasing across Italy, with the emergence of some rather powerful city-states and maritime republics. So we've got a map here. You'll see the orangey bit here is actually Genoa, who was a very important maritime republic. Pisa, another important maritime republic. The blue here is Venice, of course. You can see their extent here, mightily important maritime republic, and you can also add the Amalfi to that as well down in the southern area. Now, all of these were quite powerful, as you can see, gaining lands across the Mediterranean, and as a result, they started to trade lots of produce. They gained good trade routes to the east and the spice route and so on, but wine would be significant at this time as well. Then money starts to become important as we head towards the Renaissance. You have the city of Florence becoming the banking capital of Europe, and big famous families being established here. You've got, of course, the likes in terms of wine, like Antinori making their money in banking, but then also land, real estate, and wine production. Frescobaldi family making money as traders, and they became important landowners and wine producers after that as well. Okay, so yes, that's the emergence of a stronger economy at that time. In the Middle Ages continued. We have the names of some Italian grapes, things like Barbera and Trebbiano, being mentioned in books in the 1300s and the 14th century. But the first full treatment of Italian grape varieties, pretty much the original Italian register of grapes, was written by the Renaissance botanist, guy called Andrea Bacci, who's this the picture here, I believe, and there his name, Andrea Bacci, and famous botanist in the 16th century, late 16th century. We don't know really much more about the quality or focus of wine at this time, but we do start to get an idea of some of the key grape varieties. Then after this, we have the movement towards the Risorgimento, or the unification of Italy. Remembering, all the way up to 1861, Italy was a series of fractured areas, lots of different houses, the likes of the Kingdom of Sardinia, the Austrian Habsburgs, the Bourbon Spanish dynasty. You've got lots of different factions, Byzantine and so on, that are all over this area. So what happens is that a political and civil movement, spearheaded by the Kingdom of Sardinia, which was Sardinia and Piemonte, and really the seat of power was Piemonte, defeat the Austrian Empire, and then started to incorporate the land of the Austrian Empire into their kingdom, or what would be later called Italy. So many of the independent or semi-independent entities, such as the Dukedom of Tuscany, the Duchies of Parma, Emilia-Romagna, they voluntarily decided to join the Kingdom of Sardinia, and they aligned with that kingdom. But then they had to face the might of the Papal States, and certain serious battles ensued that, and of course the Papal States are defeated. And we have finally the unification of Italy in March of 1861. Not all of Italy that we know today, actually. Some of them, the kind of outlying areas like real northern sort of Alto Adige, the Südtirol, joined later on. But really what we kind of know of today as Italy. Moving to the modern age, so the likes of Barolo, Brunello, Chianti started to take their modern identity. Chianti becomes an important wine well before Barolo and Brunello, but its kind of modern form was adopted in the 19th century from the famous Baron Ricasoli formula. There was a revival in winemaking and grape growing, but then we have all those problems like oidium, we have phylloxera, peronospora, really affecting the second half of the 19th century. So we have phylloxera coming through and all these problems, and a lot of the local varieties become decimated, and we start to see mass replantation after phylloxera in sort of the early stages of the 20th century. And many international varieties were planted in considerable quantities. So the likes of Merlot, Chardonnay, specifically in the north and the northeast, where we find Veneto and Friuli today, for example. Many native varieties, which probably would have been wonderful today, were lost, but we have found a number of those, and they are being slowly brought back to life. Further on the modern age, the unification of Italy in 1861, plus the economic boom that ensued the Second World War eventually, set the scene for what we call the contemporary modern period. Now, immediately after the war, money was very scarce, and of course rationing was in place, and wine production was all about volume and making money. But eventually, in the 1960s, the DOC system of quality guarantee was introduced, introducing the first as Vernaccia di San Gimignano, which is the city in this picture you see, but also Barolo, Brunello, amongst others, and then focusing and championing on traditional varieties and quality. And we start to see, of course, a movement towards quality. We say that there is an Italian wine renaissance. So yes, we have quality in traditional wines, and we also see the birth of famous styles like Sassicaia, who utilize, of course, Bordeaux blends, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, but then other Super Tuscans would follow suit. We also then witness the appearance of single vineyard Barolos, Barbarescos, and others as well. And then in the northeast, we have a very important sector for creativity and innovation. Now, being quite closely linked to Austria and Germany, geographically, but also culturally, Friuli is fed a lot of this new modern winemaking. And that is where we have, lots of things like stainless steel, temperature controlled ferments, cultured but selected yeasts, things like that are brought into play. And this is the birth of modern white wine making in the northeast of Italy. Eventually, places like the Alto Adige follow suit and start to produce some absolutely wonderful wines as well. Mario Schiopetto, who's this picture here, is often called the godfather of this white wine renaissance up in Friuli. And then the recent successes would be over the last couple of decades, 2000s to today, things like Pinot Grigio, Prosecco, probably being the two biggest success stories in Europe of modern times. Thank you so much for your time. Next up, we have Climate and Vineyard Management, which is only going to be available on my e-learning portal along with 4, 5, 6, and 7. So please visit www.winewithjimmy.com for more information on how to subscribe for all of that exclusive content. Thank you so much for staying with me with all this history of Italy. I do hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have any comments, questions, pop them below this video and click like and subscribe. Thank you so much for your time, and see you for more videos here on Wine with Jimmy. Ciao for now. Goodbye.